How do I start my load development process? This is a long debated question. Is it powder, cartridge overall length? This is the old chicken and the egg argument. What comes first? Today we're going to see if starting with cartridge overall length tuning makes any sense at all, and if you hang out till the end, I'll go over why I think I may have accidentally found a problem with our test platform. So let's get started. Now during today's test, we're firing the brass for the very first time. We're fireforming. So with any luck, this will be the worst performance we see during the lifetime of this brass. To prepare our brass for its first firing, I simply ran a mandrel that's 2/1000ths under our projectile diameter, which our projectile diameter is 264, so a 262 mandrel with some dry neck lube, add some primer, powder, and projectiles, and we're ready to go to the heart of today's testing, cartridge overall length. Why not start with powder testing? Well, the case volume on these cases is going to change during the fireforming process, and it's very likely we're not going to be able to dial it in until we have consistent volume in all of our cases. But if we can't do powder, what about cartridge overall length testing? Would we be able to get more data out of our fireforming loads? Today, let's find out. If you think this is crazy, you might want to check out the Satterley Method 2.0 series that's on the Long Range with the Lilies channel. On that series, he's discussing testing cartridge overall length first before powder, which is contrary to the video series that he did with the 6.5 guys several years ago. But don't worry, it's okay, people should be able to change their minds if they want to. Our load data for today's test is simple. Brand new Lapua 6.5 Creedmoor large rifle primer brass. We're going to be using the 142 grain Sierra Match King. Our powder is a crowd favorite, Hodgins H4350. The charge weight we're picking from our experience with 140 grain ELDM, so I thought a good starting place would be 41.3 grains. A quick look at Sierra's own load data for this projectile shows a max charge all the way up to 43.3 grains. Of course, with horny brass and not Lapua, which is what we're using today. And truthfully, I'm grateful I did not start any closer to max with these Lapua cases. So far it appears that this large rifle primer brass has a smaller case volume than any of the other brass I've used so far. Our primer for today is the Fed 215M large rifle Magnum primer. Frankly, I chose Magnum primers for this combination because with H4350, historically, I've had the lowest extreme spreads and standard deviations with Magnum primers. In Satterley's video, he tested 6 different cartridge overall lengths in 30,000ths increments. This isn't something that we're going to do today because my touch point for this projectile to my lands is right about the overall length of 2.844 inches. If I tested in 30,000ths increments, I would be way further into the case than I am willing to be at this point. Book cartridge overall length on this projectile is 2.810 inches according to Sierra, and if I'm going to be in the lands, I don't want to be too far in the lands, so we're only going to be starting at 10,000ths in. We are initially going to be testing 6 groups, so cartridge overall length from 2.804 to 2.854 inches. Along with those, I took 16 additional rounds that I could adjust at the range so we could fine-tune this cartridge overall length a little bit more. For our finer tune testing today, we're going to be testing in 3,000ths increments, so a very odd number, but 34 total cases for today's testing. I know everyone's going to complain about 3-shot groups, but we're going to go back and verify it, so relax. Same adages apply. The groups never get smaller, they always get bigger the more rounds you shoot. Choose your sample size for the confidence level that you're looking for. For our initial test, we started long and went short, so our first cartridge overall length of 2.854 inches gave us a 0.54 MOA group. Going down 10,000ths further at 2.844 inches yielded a 0.31 MOA group. Going 10,000ths more, our cartridge overall length at 2.834 inches opened up to 0.75 MOA. Going 10,000ths more at a cartridge overall length of 2.824 inches, a 0.86 MOA group was what we achieved. Going 10,000ths further at a cartridge overall length of 2.814, 0.73 MOA, and our shortest cartridge overall length we test today at 2.804 inches, a 0.81 MOA group. Looking at all 6 of those groups, finding our smallest isn't very difficult. We're going to be looking at the cartridge overall length at 2.844 inches and fine-tuning around it. To make sure we cover the gamut as much as possible, we're going to start off at 2.851 inches and then move in 3,000ths increments. At a cartridge overall length of 2.851 inches, 0.45 MOA is what we achieved. Moving 3,000ths further at 2.848, 0.51 MOA. At 2.845 inches, so very close to our 2.844 that we tested before, 0.32 MOA, almost a dead repeat of our previous 0.31. Going down a little further is 2.842 inches, 0.59 MOA is what we achieved. Our very last group was going to be 4 shots. We tested at 2.839 inches, and that group overall was 0.5 MOA. Now, if it weren't for our pesky 4th shot on that last group, that would have been our best group of the day at 0.22 MOA. But I don't like just calling flyers for the sake of it. But we're going to look a little bit closer at this when we go over our pressure data. As we start to look at the pressure data, realize that I have no compensation factor calibrated in for this yet, and very likely all these pressures are going to be right at max pressure around 62,000 psi. At least that's what Quick Loads tells us for the velocities that we were able to achieve. Most of these were in the ballpark of 2,800 feet per second, but we're going to also go over that in a little bit. The short version is this pressure data is for comparison's sake only. I'm not sure our pressure data is going to tell us anything too crazy, except for one thing. Keep in mind that our software can't display more than 10 shots at a time, so for our initial groups, we're breaking this down into 2 separate charts with 9 shots on each chart. So our first chart is showing our cartridge overall length from 2.854 to 2.834. Overall, our pressures are pretty consistent, but the interesting part here is that we can see that shots 3 and 8 both had delays. If we correlate that to the groups, we can see that shot 3 of the 2.854 inches, and then also the second shot of the 2.834 inch group might have been affected by this. Our next group of 9 shows a chart with a slight delay on shot 8, which would correlate to shot 2 of our 2.804 inch cartridge overall length. Not a huge change for that group, but maybe it did open it up a little. Moving on to our 3,000 increment groups, we can see our first chart with our cartridge overall length of 2.851 and 2.848 showed no real anomalies. But looking at our next chart, we can see that shots 1, 9, and 10 all showed some sort of delay. It is hard to complain that the smallest group we had today was some sort of delay, but could it have even been smaller? Shots 9 and 10 in this chart would have correlated to our last group of the 2.839 inch cartridge overall length test. Deleting shot 4 takes this group all the way down to 0.22 MOA. At this point, I don't claim for sure that's what's causing these flyers, but I certainly think it's worth investigating. You may wonder, what is this delayed ignition and what might it be caused by? So let's look at the manual for our pressure trace system and see what they have to say. In their chart, the ignition delay appears to be a little bit worse, but it says, this chart is a classic ignition delay for a load with low load density. The primer pushes the pressure over 6,000 psi, but delays as long as a quarter millisecond occur for some shots. The load actually shot well, note the exits are over OBT markers, and it produced single-digit standard deviations. One might think this is a good load, but the quarter millisecond ignition delay is the same thing as having random action lock timing. According to the manual, it can also be caused by bad or weak primers. So let's go over these situations. For this load, this is a pretty full case. So I'm not going to agree with the load density issue for this particular combination. Our next option according to the manual is bad primers. Well, what if this works on a different combination of primer? I might just have happened to test the same combination on the same day with a different primer in a different case. Our next chart here is a 10-shot string with the CCI 41 behind the identical load and identical projectile. And we can see shot 7 has a similar delay. So whatever is causing this problem, I don't think it's this specific primer. When we start talking about random action lock timing, I'm thinking firing pin spring. The spring is at least 4 years old and has well over 4,000 rounds on it. Maybe this could do it. I don't see anyone selling aftermarket springs for my RPR, and it seems that Ruger wants you to send it in for service. I really didn't want to send my bolt back to Ruger because I really have no idea how long it would take, and scouring the internet, I found exactly one website that listed exactly one spring. So I picked it up. If you have seen this issue before, I would love to know what solved this problem for you. But I think that it's too much of a coincidence that these flyers are coming with ignition delays. Now, Ruger claims this is a factory-only part, but I'm hoping this is going to make a difference. I wanted to make a test around this that I could change the spring at the range, but frankly, the likelihood of me losing my pin means I'm probably going to be tackling it here on my bench. Firing pin spring issue or not, I do plan on testing powder and primer next. I'm not sure if we should stick with the same primer or swap it out, but I'm sure you're going to let me know what to do in the comments section below. Our main goal today was fireforming our brass, and it looks like we were able to find a reasonable starting cartridge overall length. But should we have sized our brass differently? Well, that's exactly what we tackle in this video right here, because I think there is a better way. If you'd like to help fund some of the crazy testing we do here on the channel, check out my Patreon account. I really appreciate the guys that have signed up to support me, and I hope to see you come back next week. And until then, stay safe in small groups.